I worked away for months, then I found out my yoga friend wife had been living a second life. I never imagined I'd be writing this. The internet is a strange cathedral for confession. People come, kneel, tell their things, and leave. My friends know parts, my family knows parts, my ex-wife knows none of it in the way strangers will. But Reddit is where you can say the ugly sentences out loud and hear them bounce back from strangers who somehow understand the grammar of heartbreak. So here's mine, messy, long, and probably riddled with contradictions. I am telling it from the place I stood in the wreckage. My name is Daniel. I turned 39 in the middle of the year I walked out of my marriage. I worked 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, oil field rotations, GR shift work, the kind of schedule that robs you of Tuesdays and sometimes your memory of Monday. It paid well enough to keep the mortgage from snarling at the edges and to buy the kids the occasional small miracle. A Lego set that made both of them squeal, a cheap trampoline that lasted 3 summers. My wife, Anna, and I had been together since our mid-20s. We married younger than we should have. We thought loving someone was synonymous with being ready. We had 2 kids, Milo, 8, and June, 5. That family portrait we have framed above the mantel looks like the lie I kept repeating into my teeth. We were fine. Anna was easy to love. She had a laugh that made you forgive her for being late and a way of making grocery lists read like poetry. She taught yoga to a couple of neighborhood studios and did private sessions. Her work schedule was flexible. She could be in the living room at noon for preschool pickup and the studio at 6 for an evening class. On my rotations, especially when I was away for long stretches, I trusted her the way soldiers trust their gear, because you choose to, because everything else has to work. We had a rhythm. She would send me photos of the kids in mismatched socks. I'd send back a stupid face. She would send dinner photos with the caption, "Survived." Then the rhythm loosened slowly, then fast. The first tiny thing I noticed, if you can call it that, was a change in language. Anna started saying, "I'll just go to the studio after," not "I'll stop by the grocery" or "I'll be home for bedtime." The prepositions mattered. They made distance. There were new little rituals, a reluctance to answer my calls when I called from a different time zone, a habit of turning the phone face down when the kids were at the table. Once I chalked it up to whatever gravity had rewritten us with: schedules, work, fatigue. Twice I messaged a friend on a day off and said, "She's fine, just tired." Twice the friend texted back, "You sure?" We were living on autopilot for a while. My job required focus. I had to be good at it. When you are away, you mediate your life in texts and photos, and that small, brittle version of intimacy called video calls. Anna and I had those. We had FaceTime in the nights when the kids were asleep. We had her sigh across the line as she recounted a day, and me pretending the jet lag hadn't swallowed me whole. But the late nights, the drained faces like a photograph with the saturation turned down kept creeping in. I remember the day I first felt a coldness that was a different animal from routine fatigue. I was due home after a long rotation and called her to ask what to bring. "Nothing," she said. "Don't bring anything." The answer was flat, precise, rehearsed. That should have been a red flag, but what I did instead was bring her that stupid scarf she liked and a tub of pistachio ice cream because she always let June sneak a spoon. The house smelled like lavender and boxed macaroni. The kids ran to me with the kind of unrefined joy that should have been enough to fill us. We had been through petty fights before, financial squabbles, arguments about grandparents' visits, the usual digestion of 2 lives meshed in one lease. This felt different. Her eyes were tired in a way that wasn't just tired. There was an attention being paid elsewhere. She smiled when I was there, but it looked measured, like someone practicing a favorite melody and missing a note. I did something stupid one late night when my insomnia pressed its chin against my shoulder. I was scrolling through my email on a small broken laptop that lives at the edge of a man's mind. There was a notification from a local studio and event flyer. The subject line read, "Intro to Restorative with Sammy." I'd seen the name Sammy before, in the footer of her email signature. Sammy, studio manager, part of the rotation for visiting instructors. I felt the small science of a hypothesis begin. I did what pathetic, frightened men do. I Googled the name. Instagram popped up. His feed was the kind of curated life you see when someone makes their self into a brand. Half yoga poses, half late-night coffee, half sunsets. And then I saw a series of photos. A smiling Anna at a workshop, her arm thrown around this guy's shoulder. His hands on the studio mat, palms flat and easy. Not every Instagram friendship is a crime scene. But something in the cadence of the comments, the small flirt of emojis, the inside jokes addressed to one another, felt like a language I had once learned and no longer could read. In the comments under a carousel shot, I saw a caption, "Late night practice," followed by terrible ramen and better conversation. He'd tagged Anna, and she'd responded with a laughing emoji and a heart. It's easy to tell yourself stories to survive. It's just a friend. They work together. You're away. Pick your battles. I picked silence because silence seemed like a shield that would hold until I returned and everything was explained as nothing. But being in a rotation means absence breeds suspicion, because suspicion is a domestic animal that thrives in empty rooms. The first concrete thing I found that didn't fit in nothing was left in the glove compartment of our car. I came home the first week and took the car for a drive with Milo as an excuse to get out with him. While Milo occupied himself with a handheld game, I opened the glove compartment and found a small folded receipt from a restaurant I'd never heard of. Haru for a late dinner. The date was one I didn't recognize. The handwriting on the receipt had my name because I apparently had signed something once and left it there. Beneath the signature, someone had scrawled Sammy with a little smiling face. The receipt was small. The thing about receipts is they anchor you to a place and a time in a way words can't. They are the universe's breadcrumbs. I didn't confront right away. Confrontation feels like a demolition when you've built something with the same hands. I did something more passive. I started to watch. You learn a certain kind of surveillance when you have to reconstruct affection into evidence. You notice the slip of a wrist, the late trash bag, the habit of phone face down. I found a hair tie by the sink that wasn't mine. My beard doesn't need hair ties, and a shallow perfume on the pillowcases that made me want to throw up. On a Wednesday that tasted of rain and exhaustion, Anna came home later than she said she would. She was quiet, eyes fixed on the floor when she walked, carrying in her hands a pack of takeout and a yoga mat slung over a shoulder like a private animal. I asked her how her day was. She said, "It was fine." That was the syllable of a different life. I pressed because silence crept like mold, and she folded and told me a smaller truth. Sammy had to open the studio this morning. I stayed late to help set up the new schedule. I asked if there was anyone else. She laughed, not the open laugh we used to have, but a tighter thing. "No, babe, not like that. It's fine." I believed her partly because I wanted to. Want is an economical liar. But then the evidence became less patient with my denial. I found a thread of messages on her computer left open, forgotten, the way people leave jars of secret preserves on the counter. It had begun innocently enough. "Thanks for the workshop, you were great today. You should come to my class next week." Then the tone shifted over weeks. "That was a long night. I can't stop thinking about the way you described the sequence." The messages became less about yoga and more about the bones of personal life. "You make me laugh when no one does. I wish you were here. I am not proud of what I did next." I printed. There are small rituals men and women develop when the world feels irrevocably different. Keeping a stack of printed messages, placing receipts in an envelope, making a spreadsheet with dates. It felt responsible, a catalogue of facts. But when you make a list of betrayals, it turns your life into accounting, and accounting is cold. I confronted Anna the first time I could breathe through the terror. We were alone in the kitchen, June asleep in her bed upstairs. Milo was playing a video game 2 rooms away. I put the printouts on the table like cards in a hand and said, "Who is Sammy?" Her face was knives, sharp, quick. She looked at the paper and then at me, and the answer left before the composure. "He's Samir. He's a visiting instructor from the city. We had a thing." The words landed like bricks, not shouting at first, just the sound a person makes when an organ shifts out of place. "A thing?" I asked. She could not meet my eye. She nodded. "Yes, a thing. It wasn't supposed to..." She stopped, hands on the edge of the counter. I'm sorry. Were you sleeping with him? I asked, because we were already breaking grammar. She said yes and said no. And it is the strangest cruelty to answer a question and make the answer both present and absent. She said it started with drinks after a workshop and then moved to late nights and then coffee when her marriage was a practical thing and his attention was new and warm. I thought I would be able to handle anything if it had a story. If it was a brief mistake, a single night of weakness. But affairs are not tidy. Human beings are stubborn with their desires. They settle into patterns that are hard to disrupt. And what broke me most was the smallness of the details she told me. No romantic declarations at first, no dramatic movie-style vows, just a series of tiny attentions that, when stitched together, made a rope strong enough to pull her away. Anna's narrative was mercifully nuanced. She did not villainize me any more than she needed to. She told me she felt lonely in the predictable way of being the one who holds routine together while the other goes away to build a life of urgency. I was busy working in the fields, burning sunlight into wages, and she missed the small domestic monuments that make a marriage. She said Samir listened in a way she hadn't had from me in months. He asked about the petty things. He remembered the joke she made 3 years ago and made a new joke out of it. He was young enough to be fun and old enough to be dangerous. That combination is a catalyst. I asked questions that were clinical at first. How long? When did it start? Where did it go? Her answers blurred. Months, she said. A long time, she said. I kept thinking of the kids running across the lawn in summer, Anna's laugh, the way she would braid June's hair. In the hollows of those memories, I found the tiny fractures I had ignored, an unreturned compliment, a missed doctor's appointment, a laugh that was no longer shared. We tried to navigate the practicalities like practiced bureaucrats. We separated rooms. I slept on the couch for a while because the house was too loud with what we hadn't said. We tried counseling. The counselor said who we suspected, that emotional affairs often mutate into physical ones and that the aftermath will be slow. She recommended space and rituals of transparency. She asked Anna to stop contact with him. Anna said she would. For 2 weeks she did. For 3 months the lines blurred again. The thing about betrayal is that it extends like a stain. It affects everyone who touches that cloth. Our friends started taking sides without meaning to. The neighborhood gossip is a subtle murderer. You think people can be subtle with kindness, but they flee awkwardness the way birds avoid storm clouds. A mutual friend asked me to meet for coffee and ended the conversation with, "If you need anything." As if anything is a thing you can hand over in a paper cup. Family members offered platitudes and then retreated. I watched the social scaffolding around me either buckle or stiffen. The children were the worst of this geography. Milo, who had just started 3rd grade, seemed to sense a change even when we kept schedules stable. He began waking up at night to check the doors and would slip into our bed smelling of the fear he could not name. June became clingy during errands, buried her face into Anna's shoulder and then into mine, urgent for reassurance. Explaining things to children without breaking them is an art I did not yet possess. We told them as much as we could without making them complicit in adult sorrow. Sometimes adults have problems, we said. It's not your fault. The kids believed us because kids are generous. But later, in private, I caught Milo glancing at the bed we once shared with a question in his eyes that he swallowed. There were moments of cinematic cruelty. I once drove out to a downtown studio because a neighbor texted me she saw Anna and Samir walking out of a bar together at 3 in the morning, umbrellas forgotten. I sat in the car and watched them laughing, shoulders brushing, a small world where my name wasn't being used. I wanted to be the thunderclap. I wanted to scream, curse, ruin them. Instead, I cried into my palms like a man who had missed the last train home. The legal and financial things crept in like intrusive relatives. We talked about what separation would look like, who would keep the house, who would take the car. People asked, "Are you getting a lawyer?" As if law is the neat tool that heals everything. The truth is, law provides answers to numbers, but not to the blood in your chest. We both feared dragging the kids into court battles, so we tried mediation quietly and quietly failed. Emotions are messy, suited for improvisation, not forms. For months, the relationship existed in limbo. Anna would leave, then return. She'd say, "It's over with him," and then be late again. She'd apologize and then apologize again. There is a banal cruelty in apologies that don't stick. They become like broken tools, promises without function. I oscillated between fury and a kind of grief so deep it felt like dissociation. You process betrayal on the slow conveyor of time, not the fireworks of a film. I also did what men often don't. I went to therapy for myself. I needed a place to put what I was feeling that wasn't a coffee shop with a friend who would inevitably say, "Just leave." The therapist asked me not to react while she fed me small truths. "You're allowed to grieve the relationship you thought you had," she said. "You're allowed to feel angry without acting criminally. You're allowed to take care of yourself." That permission was tiny but effective. It allowed me to move. Anna told me she still loved the children more than anything. She said she was sorry for the damage. She stopped seeing Samir in public for a while. She told me she had fallen into a pattern of seeking validation in the wrong places. She also told me she wanted to try to repair what had broken. I think we both wanted something that wasn't possible without massive change. Repair requires time and a sustained renovation of habits, a renovation I was not sure I wanted to fund. There is a strange ethics test that follows betrayal. People around you will project what they think you should do. Some urged me to punish, to make her pay. Others said to forgive and move on. I found comfort in people who asked fewer questions and offered practical help. A dropped dinner, an extra ear for Milo when he was up all night. You discover who you need by who shows up for the kids, not for your melodrama. The moment of finality came quietly. It wasn't a dramatic door slam. It was a morning in late autumn where the light came shallow through the windows and the kettle had gone cold on the stove. We were both exhausted from the work of pretending to be okay. Anna sat at the kitchen table with a mug that wasn't hers wrapped in both palms and said, "I think we need to end it." Not the words I wanted or expected. What I wanted in my chest was an adversary, someone to blame that would justify me. What I didn't want was compassion. And yet, in that small bowl of an utterance, we saw the end as adults do, as the recognition of mutual failure, not as a theatrical victory for anyone. We decided to separate formally. We drew up a schedule for the children that clumsily balanced our fragility and their need. We agreed to co-parent with as much kindness as possible. For the first few months I flailed. Loneliness collapsed like cheap paper. I cried in the car in parking lots. I realized the house was larger with fewer voices, but also colder. Friends tried to help. A neighbor who had once watched our kids play daily offered to take Milo for weekend afternoons so I could sleep. Those small acts kept me upright. Gradually, as the demarcations of divorce became official, I found a new rhythm. There is a particular terror that comes with the first time you sleep alone after years. You imagine the walls pressing inward. You discover you can breathe. I picked up small things that had been dormant inside me. A piano in the corner of the community center that had been calling my name. A half-finished novel I had once abandoned. The world offered, in revenge, possibilities. Anna and I met for the kids' birthdays in the same room, awkwardly competent at being adults. We had learning curves, how to be amicable enough to keep the kids from being torn. We would split holidays and coordinate schedules. There were days when I would see her on the other side of the school gate and remember her laugh and then keep walking. The emotional economy of being exes is strange. You still own a small piece of each other's history and feel sudden, inexplicable tenderness that's not allowed to be confessed. As for Samir, I heard through the leak of social media that he moved to another city after a work rotation. Maybe he did. Maybe he stayed. It no longer felt important to know. His presence had been catalytic, not structural. He ignited a process. What afterward did not revolve around him. In some ways, he was a symptom of what existed beneath a marriage's tidy surface, the hunger for attention, the small, unmet needs that accumulate like dust. People ask me if I regret staying as long as I did, if I regret waiting to confront her or not confronting her earlier. I wish I could say yes or no with clarity. The truth is complicated. If I left instantaneously, the kids would have had to swallow my rashness. If I had stayed and tried to mend things earlier in a true way, maybe some aspects of our marriage would have been salvaged. There is no simple moral ledger where the right choices win. There is only the messy arithmetic of being human. What I can tell you now, after the paperwork and the court signatures and the awkward holiday dinners, is that I have become more careful with my attention. I try to notice small things, how Milo tilts his head when he's thinking, how June hums when she's building blocks. Attention, a mundane, unsexy thing, turns out to be a kind of repair. I go to the kids' recitals and actually listen. I don't spend my night dreaming of promotions in rooms far away. I learned, the hard way, that relationships are maintained in marginalia, in sick days, in forgotten phone calls, in the way you tuck in someone who is hurting. I don't hate Anna. I don't love her in the way that makes me want to give the world for her. I carry both tenderness and bitterness. Memory is not a single color, it's smeared with many pigments. I wish I could say we parted like saints. We did not. We parted like people who still carry belongings in boxes. Messy, practical, occasionally kind. There were moments we helped each other after moving boxes because neither of us wanted the kids to witness the small humiliations of domestic collapse. If there is one thing I want anyone reading this to understand, especially those of you who have been betrayed, it is this. Betrayal does not erase the person you loved or the good that once existed. It complicates it. It places the relationship inside a new container where reconstruction is possible, but only with different tools. Forgiveness and reconciliation are not mandatory. They are choices that require rebuilding of patterns that betrayed trust. Some people rebuild together. Some people build separate lives that are kinder. To the person out there who is on the other side of the screen and living this story now, collect your facts. Get a safe space where you can speak the ugliness out loud without being judged by someone who will only offer platitudes. Keep the kids' stability central. If you need a lawyer, get one. If you need to sleep in the car for a night because you cannot stand the house you have to leave, arrange something safer. Breathe. Go to therapy. The world will not arrange itself nicely for you, but there are people, strangers, professionals, old friends, who will hand you a towel when you are wet with grief. There are things I would do differently in hindsight. I would have noticed the small moments I ignored. I would have communicated earlier and less defensively. I would have cultivated the small attentions that make a marriage adult and soft. I would have been less afraid to be boringly present. But I would also tell myself, you did the best with the map you had. And the map for many of us is smudged. It's been 18 months since the first receipt in the glove compartment. The house is smaller now, filled with boxes labeled for donation and the toys the kids no longer play with. There are new routines. There are new friends. There are times when I look at a photo and feel an ache so acute it makes my hands go cold. There are times when I think about Anna doing a sun salutation in a studio somewhere and feel nothing at all. The last thing I will say, if someone loves you, they show up for the small things. Not the nights you imagined in movies, but the burnt breakfasts, the ruined garden, the laundry basket folded into the shape of tenderness. That's the thing that prevents a man from going away and a woman from getting lost in another pair of arms. Not grand gestures, small, repeated ones. If you've stuck with me through this long confession, thank you. I don't have an epilogue or a moral neatly stamped on the back. I have a life that continues, messy and luminous in equal parts. I have 2 children who are learning from our mess how to be better than we were. And I have a slow, stubborn life to rebuild one small attention at a time.